Hello everyone. Hello everyone. This week's parsha is Parshat Eikev, in which we're going to explore the Ramban and the two themes he brings out that are essential to this parsha. So the first theme we're going to explore, we're going to see, is going to be in the opening psukim. We're going to pull up a source sheet over here, and the Ramban notes how in the beginning psukim there are many refrains that seem to be similar. There's pen tishkach, lest you forget, v'shachachta Hashem lokacha, hamotziach me'eretz Mitzrayim me'beit avadim. This theme exists of Bnei Yisrael forgetting that God was one who brought them out of Mitzrayim into the Midbar and eventually to the land of Israel. Now, in the scheme of things, Bnei Yisrael is on the verge of entering into Eretz Yisrael, at the edge of the Midbar. And at the end of this 40-year sojourning, Bnei Yisrael has been told by Moshe these themes in order to ensure the new generation will be able to carry on these themes to their future generations within the land of Israel. Now, this first theme that we're seeing is that there's a charta and al tishkach, pen tishkach. Now, one should not forget that this last pasuk in pasuk Yud Chet, it says it most clearly. That God is the one who gave you this ability, koach lasot chayil, this ability to have strength and to be able to conquer other nations and to be able to win battles and to be able to survive. Now, the Ramban notes on this that within the Midbar, Bnei Yisrael were taken care of in any need that they possibly could have thought of. The Tiskor Ode, the Ramban writes, Kibe Midbar asher ein la'el yadcha lachyot sham aselecha kol tzorkecha. That God gave you every need in the Midbar. Im kein gam achai lazar asher asita bechochacha Hashem hu shenatan lecha koach kasher asita yoto. That God is the one who's giving you the strength to be able to live, to survive every single day, and to be able to conquer these other nations. And the Ramban caps off this theme by writing, Tishkach et Hashem yechalek kochacha v'sharcha v'toved v'tavod kasher avdu hem kikos v'Hashem mikalu. The Ramban notes on the similar theme of Sefer Dvarim, giving a sense of Musar, a sense of rebuke to Bnei Yisrael, saying that if you do not follow these steps of being able to recognize God's granting strength and power, then you will unfortunately be unable to conquer and be able to not be able to live in the land. That this strength will end. Now the Ramban notes this. That's the first theme. That Bnei Yisrael are given this strength, and they're the ones who are conquering the land through God's allowing them to. The second theme we're going to explore quickly, just to speed up the pace over here, is that in Parak Tet, the next parak, it says, Al Tamar Bilvavcha, that you should not tell yourself that God is the one who only brought you so far and that you are continuing to gain this land on your own merits. Rather, Ramban points out, we'll see in the psukim inside, B'yadata kilo v'sikatcha shamakachan temlachat aretz tova hazot rishta ki am ksheorvata. But Israel, you've sinned, Moshe is telling them, and that it is not through your own merits that you are solely gaining this land. Rather, it is because the choat ishkach et asher tzavta shamakecha b'midbar lemin hayom asher tzavta b'mitzrayim ad ba'alchem al makom hazeh mamrim ha'itim Hashem. You Bnei Israel, you sinned, you made mistakes, though it is entirely a gift to you that you're receiving the land of Israel. What the Ramban is pointing out, we're going to see in some of the psukim, is that the Bnei Israel shouldn't be thinking that this is a gift to them due to their own merits purely. The Ramban is noting there's a difference here. That, as I mentioned over here in the psukim, this land, God swore, God gave an oath to their forefathers, they'd give it to them. And it's for that reason that Bnei Israel, you are inheriting the land. Now, this is something that's hard to hear for Bnei Israel to rebuke, though the Ramban notes that Bnei Israel has to be made aware that this is not a gift that has purely been given to them due to their own merits. Rather, it is because it's something that's owed to them. Now, the Ramban notes this in his own words. Bavor shvuat avotecha yarashta ota haaretz. That Bnei Yisrael, you unfortunately acting irresponsibly in the Midbar and not following God's ways entirely, that won't be able to get rid of the gift. This is a gift that Bnei Yisrael is receiving the land of Israel. Well, you should know it as a gift. Now, at least there are two things we mentioned. The first thing we mentioned was that Bnei Yisrael is not doing this to their own actions. Rather, God is the one granting them the land and fighting the wars and giving them the strength to be able to fight these wars. And the second point is that it's not a gift entirely to Bnei Yisrael due to their actions and their merits. It's rather something that is promised to Bnei Yisrael, and for that reason they're receiving the land. Now, and we know these two themes, we could perhaps put this essentially together as a theme for the entire parsha, which the Ramban, I believe, sort of does at the end of the parsha on a pasuk which notes in Parak Yud Aleph, we'll read it inside over here. Parak Yud Aleph, pasuk Yud Bet. It says, that we're describing the land of Israel is differentiated. It's from the land of Mitzrayim, in that the land of Mitzrayim is constantly overflowing with water and rivers. However, when it comes to Eretz Yisrael, Eretz Yisrael Hashem Lokecha Doresh Tatamid, Einei Hashem Lokecha Ba Mereshit Hashana Ad Acharit Hashana. That when it comes to the land of Israel, one has to constantly be yearning that God is overlooking the land, but we have to be able to yearn for rain. We have to be able to daven for rain, and we rely on the rain in the land of Israel as opposed to the land of Mitzrayim, which has these constant Yan Hayarak. It's constantly overflowing with vegetation and springs, and the Nile River constantly allowing the Bnei Israel and whoever lives in Mitzrayim to be able to gain from the land there. The land of Israel is different. That is what is being pointed out in the Psukim Yud 3 Bet, and then followed by those Psukim we have Vayam Shemo, the famous paragraph in Shema, which describes that Bnei Israel will be granted the rain if they ask God for it properly. Now, this end group of Psukim, all the way through the end of the Parsha, is essentially accomplishing this purpose of bridging those two themes. The first theme, that Bnei Israel is not doing this through their own actions, it's rather God giving them the strength to do it. And the second point, that it's not due to their own merits that they're inheriting the land. Now, what's different about Eretz Yisrael that Bnei Yisrael has to learn is that Eretz Yisrael is a land that relies solely on your yearning for living there, and your yearning for davening and for acting properly in God's ways. Bnei Yisrael in Midbar, what God has expressed to them in the first place, they were granted things. They were granted things entirely by God, not due to their own merits. They were just given everything they needed. That is what the first part of the Parsha is perhaps establishing. The second part of the Parsha is that Bnei Israel is given this land, and they have to know to act properly, and that it's given to them as a gift. Now that they know it's a gift for them, not due to their own actions, they have to understand this, internalize this message, and be able to act properly within the land. And the Ramban ends off this with a really nice parable. He says, when God can easily get rid of all the rivers of Mitzrayim and just to destroy them and to make them rely solely on to make them realize that it's coming from God. But when it comes to the land of Israel, it's more noticeable. It's more easy, perhaps, even though it's the same thing in God's eyes to destroy and to be able to get rid of the rain in Israel. It'll be noticed quicker as the land of Israel relies on rain. If there's no rain, then it'll be noticeable quicker. Now, the Ramban compares this to someone who's sick. That someone who's sick needs constant prayer, as opposed to someone who is healthy all the time, who has not yet experienced sickness, doesn't necessarily feel this need for prayer sometimes. That God is able to supply for both of these people. Someone who's able to feel the suffering, feel someone that is lacking, and someone who has given everything. Now, the Ramban is perhaps establishing at the end of the Parsha here that the new generation, the Bnei Israel, is entering into the land. They have to realize that they were given everything by God, and now that they were experienced everything in the Midbar, and there's new generations entering into the land of Israel, they have to understand that when they enter into the land of Israel, things change. They have to now be able to be entirely reliant on God through prayer. This land of Israel is something that Bnei Israel enter into a covenant with God, that they realize that this is a new beginning for them to be able to start afresh and to be able to enter into this covenant again by entering into the land of Israel, and to be able to understand that it is entirely based on their actions when they will be granted rain. And that's what the end of the Parsha ends off on a happy note in a sense. Then so in a sense, it's a little bit of sad rebuke at the beginning of this parsha, but the themes that are woven into the parsha are telling me so they will be given the land, they will be able to inherit it, but it's up to them to act properly now that they know they can act properly in the land. And if that is done, then they will enter into land, and we hope for that to be able to occur speedily in our days. Have a good Shabbos, everyone.